My Lord and my God, I firmly believe that you are here, that you see me, that you hear me. I adore you with profound reverence. I ask your pardon for my sins and grace to make this time of prayer fruitful. My Immaculate Mother, Saint Joseph, my Father and Lord, my guardian angel, intercede for me. Jesus, many times I wonder what it must have been like for Mary in the years after your ascension. Joseph had already died and was in heaven. You had died. You had risen. You had spent 40 days among your brethren, among the apostles. And then you ascended into heaven. And Mary remained on earth. She wasn't alone. She was with St. John. St. John had welcomed her into his house. You, after all, on the cross, had given St. John to Mary as her son. St. John and all Christians, all beloved disciples, to Mary as her children. And you gave Mary to the beloved disciple, to all beloved disciples. You gave us Mary as our mother. What would those years have been like after your ascension? Mary and St. John the Apostle together in their home. I could just imagine the two of them sitting in the living room one evening and talking about you. What would they talk about? What kind of what memories did they have in common? Probably the first memory that they had in common would be the wedding feast at Cana. The wedding of maybe one of your relatives. And John saw Mary looking around the table nervously and then get up, come over to you, whisper something in your ear. Some kind of hushed conversation, maybe a slight look, unusual look on Mary's face, unclear whether it was frustration or amusement. And then she suddenly turns to the waiters, and St. John heard her say, "Do whatever he tells you." St. John probably remembers exactly the tone of Mary's voice, how she said that to the waiters, "Do whatever he tells you." And Mary, thinking back on the same event, tells St. John, I really didn't quite know what to make of Jesus's response. I just knew he was going to do what I had told him to do. And I'm not sure if it was for my tone or if it because he knew it would make me happy or whatever, or just because I'm mom. I was very sure that he was going to do what I had told him to do. Maybe Mary and John's conversation continues on to harder memories. Maybe they remember when St. John dashed off from the garden and told Mary that you had been arrested. And then John and Mary remember making their way through the crowd to the streets, to the alleyways leading from the Praetorium to Golgotha. The crowd opens up and Mary fell forward to go and comfort you, Jesus. She wiped your face. She had no words for you. Maybe Mary and John actually remember that scene, but in silence. They just say, "Do you remember when Jesus was carrying his cross?" And they remembered it quietly, painfully. But in every little detail, all that painful memory burned into their minds, seared into their hearts. And then finally someone breaks the silence and says, "Yeah, And gosh, after all that, just crucified. Mary and John perhaps again remember that scene in silence, in the same way at which they had stood at the foot of the cross, in silence. But then John breaks the silence and says, but Mary, what about the resurrection? Do you remember that? Both Mary and John had lived it in very different ways. John had been scared and gloomy, sitting with the other apostles, when all of a sudden other women came in frantically screaming that they had seen the Christ, and John and Peter took off running and saw the empty tomb. Meanwhile, Jesus, maybe you went to go see your mother separately, to go reveal yourself to her, risen from the dead, glorious, as a sort of vindication of her faith amid so much darkness. And of course, Mary and John would also remember your ascension into heaven, that bittersweet event, seeing you rise into heaven in your glory, but that was also the final goodbye, the last time they would see you with their human eyes. It was more definitive. Then, of course, Mary would have those memories which were only hers. She would remember when the angel Gabriel came to tell her that she was going to conceive you. Your mother would remember when she went over to the hill country to visit your Aunt Elizabeth and their happy meeting, your cousin John the Baptist leaping in Elizabeth's womb, how she just poured forth in a joyful praise. She would remember when you were born in a stable in Bethlehem. She would remember just how much uncertainty there was, how inadequate she and Joseph felt to be caring for the Messiah. And those moments of light and discovery when they realized, this isn't just Messiah, this is God himself. When the Holy Spirit gave them to understand more fully exactly who you are. And Mary, she didn't understand what you said to her and to Joseph when they found you in the temple. She didn't understand even entirely what the angel Gabriel was telling her at the Annunciation. Things were uncertain when she was fleeing into Egypt, and things didn't make sense when shepherds and wise men were coming to visit you as a baby. But she worked it over in her heart. She kept all these things, pondering them in her heart. Then, of course, John would contribute his own memories, things that only he had seen, that Mary had never seen. For example, the Transfiguration. The only people who had seen it were Peter, James, and John. But certainly John had talked it over with your mother Mary many times as they poured over your life together. Or also the institution of the Eucharist. St. John had seen that, but Mary hadn't. Today, on this feast day of your mother, under the title Our Lady of the Rosary, we can think back on one of those evening conversations between the Apostle John and Mary, your mother, John's mother, our mother. We can think back on John contemplating your life, your face, through the eyes and heart of Mary. Mary reflecting back on your life. That is what we want, Lord. Seeing your life, your face, through the eyes and heart of your mother. I thank you, my God, for the good resolutions, affections, and inspirations that you have communicated to me in this time of prayer. I ask your help to put them into effect. My Immaculate Mother, Saint Joseph, my Father and Lord, my guardian angel, intercede for me.